No one expected her to survive. Even fewer thought she'd be the one to lead. In the pitch-black silence of the Nevada desert, the GPS went dark. The radio hissed and died. Then an explosion shattered the stillness. The unit froze, breathless, paralyzed. And that's when she stepped forward. No weapon, no map, no permission. Just a woman once dismissed as a walking PR doll. "Get back," someone shouted in panic. But she didn't stop. She didn't say much. She simply knelt, pressed her hand against the sand, closed her eyes, and walked. They used to laugh. Her hair will get messed up before she ever finishes a real mission. But that night, every life in that unit hung on the rhythm of her footsteps. And none of them knew she was listening to something they'd all forgotten, the breath of the earth. You see, Lieutenant Emily Reese didn't belong in the eyes of the military. At least not to them. She was 29. Smart, calm, and far too beautiful, they whispered, to be taken seriously in uniform. Before enlisting, Emily had been a fashion model. Her face once graced national campaigns. Her stride once owned the runway. But after her grandfather passed a proud Apache elder who raised her, she walked away from lights and cameras and chose silence and service. She trained hard, never complained, always passed. But they never stopped watching her like she was out of place. They called her G.I. Barbie, said she was assigned to Bravo 3 just to make the press photos look good. She heard it all, and said nothing. Because Emily had learned one thing from her grandfather: let them talk. The earth never speaks, but it always remembers who listens. And Emily. She listened. In Bravo 3, Emily was always present, but never really part of the team. She carried her gear, she followed every order. She never missed a mark, but the others looked at her and only saw the surface polished, quiet, composed. To them, it didn't matter how many drills she passed. What mattered was that her hair never looked out of place, that her uniform somehow still fit like it was tailored for a photo shoot. They didn't say it to her face, of course, but the jokes floated through the air like dust in sunlight. Make sure the wind doesn't ruin her eyeliner. Think she packed her makeup or her field compass. She's probably got a manicure appointment after this. Emily would smile, the same soft, unreadable smile. Not forced, not fake, just quiet. No one knew she heard every word. No one guessed she remembered them all. And not one of them imagined that one night they'd be clinging to that smile like a lifeline. The mission sounded simple enough. A nighttime reconnaissance drill deep in the Nevada desert. Nothing hostile, just movement, formation, navigation. At least, that's what they were told. As the sun dipped behind the jagged hills, Bravo 3 moved out in staggered formation. The air turned sharp and dry. Sand scraped against their boots like whispers trying to speak. Emily stayed in the middle of the pack, eyes forward, lips sealed. No one talked much, not out here, but still the silence felt heavier than usual. Even the wind didn't move the way it should. One soldier cracked a joke, something about aliens and secret bases. A few half-hearted laughs followed, then faded into the wind. But Emily wasn't laughing. She'd noticed it 10 minutes ago, a faint tremor in the ground. Barely there, but real, like the earth had shifted, and hadn't shifted back. She said nothing, just listened, and kept walking. About an hour in the first thing to go silent was the GPS. Sergeant Hale tapped the screen on his wrist console. Nothing. He frowned, gave it a firm slap. Still nothing. Must be the satellite, he muttered. Desert interference. No one panicked. Yet. Stuff like that happened. Sometimes. Then the radio started cracking. Hissing, static, distorted tones. Messages cut in, then vanished mid-word. Private Reynolds tried to reach base command. Alpha Control, this is Bravo 3. A high-pitched screech answered him. Then, nothing. Captain Hartwell kept his voice steady. Maintain formation. Eyes open. Probably just terrain shadowing. But Emily knew better. She felt it in her spine, a hum that wasn't from the wind. Something old, something buried, and then the clouds swallowed the stars. The kind of darkness that doesn't just cover the sky. It presses against your ribs. That's when she whispered to herself, "This ground is holding its breath." It happened fast. 1 second only wind, the next, boom. A sharp crack tore through the desert, followed by a heavy thud beneath the ground. Then silence. Not the calm kind. The kind that leaves your ears ringing and your thoughts scrambling to catch up. Everyone hit the dirt, weapons drawn, eyes wide, hearts racing. Captain Hartwell shouted over the dust. "Eyes up, who fired?" No one answered. No one had. The blast hadn't come from any of them. They scanned the horizon. Nothing. No enemies, no flash, no movement. Then someone pointed toward a dark ridge just a few yards ahead. There a shallow crater in the sand. Smoke curling upward, slow and thin. Private Torres murmured, "That was a mine." A beat. "Then there's no minefield listed in this sector." And that was when it sank in. They weren't just lost, they were trapped. No one moved. Not an inch. Not a breath too loud. Because once the word minefield was spoken out loud, it changed everything. Suddenly, the very ground beneath them became a question without an answer. Every grain of sand a threat. Every step forward a coin toss against death. The radios dead. Static only. The compass spinning slowly aimless. Even the wind seemed to hush as if it too knew not to disturb what lay buried. Captain Hartwell's voice finally broke the silence, low-strained. "Everyone, stay exactly where you are." Someone muttered a prayer. Another clutched their helmet tighter. The desert, so wide and open just moments ago, now felt like a room with no exits. And in that fragile stillness, Emily stood motionless. Her fingers flexed at her side. Because while the others stared outward, searching for enemies, she felt something beneath her boots. A rhythm. A shift. Like the earth was asking her a question, and waiting for her to answer. While the others stood frozen, afraid to lift a foot. Emily lowered herself slowly, almost deliberately, and touched the earth. No command, no explanation. She slipped off her right glove, pressed her bare palm to the sand, closed her eyes. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. There was no ceremony, no declaration. Just stillness. Sergeant Hale glanced over confused. "What's she doing?" someone whispered. "Is she praying?" Another scoffed. "No, she's posing." Again. But Emily wasn't praying, or posing, or panicking. She was listening. The sand was cold now, and dry. But underneath there were patterns, faint, inconsistent pulses. Her fingertips felt them like whispers in a locked room. It wasn't sonar, it wasn't training, it was memory. Years ago, her grandfather had taught her this in the canyons of Arizona. The ground remembers everything. If you're patient enough, it will speak. And tonight, it was speaking loud and clear. Emily opened her eyes, slow, steady. The wind caught a strand of hair across her face, but she didn't brush it away. She simply stood. No words, no drama. Then she took a single step forward. Deliberate, measured. Not fast, not hesitant, just certain. "Lieutenant Reese." "Stop right there," Captain Hartwell's voice cracked. But she didn't stop. She placed her boot down, gently pressing into the sand as if asking permission. Nothing happened. No explosion, no click, only silence. Everyone held their breath. She paused, then took another step. Same precision, same rhythm. Sergeant Hale blinked. "She's just walking." Not walking, reading. Each footfall hovered for a heartbeat before touching down like a dancer in slow motion. Her fingertips grazed the surface between each step, feeling for the slightest change beneath. They still thought she was guessing. But Emily wasn't guessing. She was following the voice of the ground, and it was leading her somewhere no map ever could. For a moment, no one moved. Emily kept walking slow, deliberate, leaving behind a fragile trail of footprints like threads in the sand. Every pair of eyes tracked her movements. Every heart beat louder than the desert wind. Then, one pair of boots broke rank. Sergeant Miller, the same one who once called her G.I. Barbie under his breath, he stepped forward, not fast, not proud, but steady, like a man who'd rather trust the impossible than die standing still. Someone hissed, "You're seriously following her." Miller didn't answer. He just looked ahead and said almost quietly, "I don't know how she knows, but she knows." And then he moved, placing his foot directly where hers had been. The silence thickened. Then one more followed. Then another. The chain had begun, not of command, but of trust. And at the front of it all was the woman they'd never taken seriously, until now. They followed in single file. No words, no questions. Just the soft crunch of boots pressing into pre-marked sand, a delicate echo behind Emily's every step. She never looked back. Each time she paused, she lowered a hand, brushing the ground like she was testing its mood. Sometimes she shifted left. Sometimes a barely visible curve to the right. Each adjustment made without hesitation. It was like watching someone walk through fog only they could see. Captain Hartwell kept his distance, eyes locked on her form, trying to decode what she was reading from a world he couldn't touch. And the others, they walked with shoulders tight, hearts, pounding eyes fixed on her heels. One wrong move, and they were dust. But with every safe step, a strange calm began to spread. Like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't madness. This was something else, something older, something real, a language written in silence, and Emily was fluent. The line was holding. Step after step, they moved forward like shadows pulled by a thread. But, in the desert, certainty is fragile. Private Mason was near the back, young, anxious, the kind who always looked twice before blinking. His foot slipped just slightly. A pebble rolled beneath his heel. He stumbled sideways. A breath caught in 20 chests. He fell hard, his left boot skidding outside the path. Emily stopped. Instantly. She turned, not with panic, but with purpose. Her voice was calm, firm. "Don't move, not a muscle." She crouched beside him, pressing her hand into the ground near his fall. Her brow tightened. Then she reached out slowly, deliberately, and pulled him back into the line. Only then did she whisper almost to herself, "It's sleeping. For now." No one asked what it was. No one wanted to know. They just stepped more carefully after that, much more carefully. Captain Hartwell had commanded men through sandstorms, gunfire, and worse. But tonight, under a sky with no stars, he realized something he hadn't felt in 20 years. He was no longer in control. He watched Emily the way she moved, read the ground, made choices without hesitation. There was no arrogance in her posture. No need to prove anything, only precision. And something deeper, something he couldn't name. She wasn't just guessing her way through a minefield. She was navigating it like it belonged to her, and the men. They didn't ask if they should follow her anymore. They just did. Hartwell adjusted the strap on his rifle. His voice when it came was low, more thought than command. From now on, we move when she moves. No salute, no ceremony, just a captain stepping aside, and a woman walking ahead like she was born for it. The desert had a rhythm, a pulse beneath the silence. Emily had followed it for miles now, footsteps in harmony with the earth's breath. But suddenly, something shifted. She stopped, pressed her fingers to the sand again. The ground felt wrong. Not dangerous, not yet, but unfamiliar. Like a language that sounded the same, but meant something else. She closed her eyes, focused. The vibration was sharper here, tighter. Not the dull old hum of buried mines, but something newer, clean. Behind her, the line halted. Captain Hartwell stepped closer, watching. "What is it?" Emily didn't answer right away. She brushed back a layer of sand, slow, careful, and something metallic caught the moonlight. A sliver of casing, angular, polished, too polished. She whispered, barely audible, "This wasn't laid years ago." She looked up at the captain. "Someone put this here recently." The desert didn't just hold memory now, it was hiding something. They gathered around it, half-buried, half-exposed, a device that shouldn't have been there. Not military standard, not Russian, not even listed on their threat recognition charts. Sergeant Hale crouched beside Emily, eyes narrowed. "This isn't in the manual." She nodded. "Because it's not supposed to exist." Another soldier, Torres, brushed away sand a few feet to the left. Another glint, another casing. Sleek, new, marked with nothing. Private Mason whispered, "This doesn't feel like a minefield." Captain Hartwell didn't speak. Not yet. He was too busy reading the expression on Emily's face. Not fear, not confusion. Recognition. She looked down at the exposed metal, then out at the still dark desert stretching endlessly ahead. "This isn't just buried danger," she said quietly. "This is a test, a pause. Not of terrain, of us." No one replied, because deep down they all felt it. They weren't navigating a trap, they were inside an experiment. She'd seen devices like this before. Once. Years ago, but she never told anyone. It was during her final year as a civilian, just before enlisting, when a quiet man in a gray suit showed up at her apartment. He didn't smile, didn't introduce himself, he only asked questions. "Can you still hear movement underground? How far down with bare hands or through boots?" Then he showed her a file, no name on it, no agency listed, just a title, Project Earthwalker, and a single photo, a sleek, unnamed device just like the one buried in this desert. She never answered him. She never signed anything. She thought that was the end of it. But standing here now, wind licking her face, ground humming faintly under her soles, she knew better. This wasn't a minefield gone wrong. This was the continuation of something that had never really ended. And now she was back in it, whether she agreed or not. They kept moving. One step, then another. The line held. The pattern continued. But something had shifted, not in the earth, in her. Emily's movements were still precise, still sure. But there was a heaviness now, like her thoughts were louder than the wind dragging behind every step. The others noticed. Sergeant Hale watched her hands. They hovered a little longer now. Her pauses came a little more often. Torres glanced at Captain Hartwell, then back at Emily. No one asked anything. Not yet. But the silence between them grew thick, suspicious, uneasy. Because they could feel it even if they couldn't explain it. She knew something. Something she hadn't said. And in a minefield, truth wasn't just trust. It was survival. Emily didn't speak. She couldn't. Because the words she'd kept buried for years were now buried here too, somewhere beneath their feet. And the ground was starting to whisper back. A voice broke the silence behind her. Torres. Not loud. Not accusing. Just remembering. "I've seen you do this before," he said. Emily didn't turn, but she heard him. 3 years ago. Camp Echo. You were kneeling in the sand same way. I was on the other side of the glass. Project Earthwalker. A long pause hung between them. I wrote in my report, gifted but unproven, too instinctual, too emotional. He exhaled, voice lower now. You saved my life tonight. You didn't even blink. Just reached out like the earth had already told you where I'd fall. Emily looked over her shoulder. Calm. Measured. The earth remembers, she said softly. Even when people forget, there are silences that protect, and silences that destroy. Emily wasn't sure which one she was holding anymore. She could feel their eyes behind her back. Not angry, not yet, but questioning. Each step she took was no longer just a path forward. It was a decision. Tell them everything about Project Earthwalker, about the man with no name, about how this minefield wasn't an accident. Or say nothing. Just get them out alive. She pressed her hand to the ground again, fingers spread wide. The tremor was closer now, sharper, controlled, like a heartbeat, not her own. Captain Hartwell stepped up behind her. He didn't ask. He just looked at her for a long moment and said quietly, "You know more than you're saying." Emily looked away, not out of shame, out of duty, Because some truths weren't meant to be spoken. They were meant to be carried, and she was still walking. Emily stopped mid-step. Not because of what she saw, the horizon still stretched empty and still, but because of what she felt. A vibration just beneath the surface repeating, pulsing. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. Like a warning light in a tunnel no one could see. She dropped to one knee, hand flat to the sand. Her breath caught. The pulse wasn't isolated. It was layered, like multiple signals. Too clean, too close. She stood turned sharply to the left. No explanation, no delay. Just, we change course, now. Captain Hartwell raised an eyebrow. Why, Emily's voice was tight, focused. Because if we keep going that way, we stop walking, permanently. That was all. She didn't need trust. She needed obedience. Because whatever lay ahead wasn't terrain. It was a line. One that wasn't meant to be crossed. And someone somewhere was watching to see if they would. No one argued. They turned when she turned. Boots pivoted in the sand. A new path formed, one without lines, without landmarks, without logic. But they followed. And, with each step, the silence grew heavier. Not from fear of minds that fear had become background noise. No, this was something else. A presence. Unseen, but undeniable. Like the feeling of standing on a stage, with the curtains drawn, and someone out there watching. Sergeant Hale whispered to no one in particular, "This isn't a drill." No one answered. Up ahead, Emily kept moving, eyes scanning not the terrain, but the tension in it. The way the sand shifted too easily in some spots. The unnatural rhythm of the breeze. She wasn't guiding them through chaos. She was guiding them through design. And every step they took wasn't just survival. It was data. Collected, measured, observed. They kept walking. Every man behind her now understood they were no longer part of a mission. They were inside something crafted. Then, in a low voice from the back of the line, Torres said it. Like a memory he wasn't sure was real. Earthwalker. The word fell like a stone in a still pond. No one repeated it, but everyone heard. Emily paused. Her hand, mid-air, hovered longer than usual. Captain Hartwell stepped closer, his voice calm. "That's not a code name people just guess, Lieutenant." She didn't turn, didn't nod. She just said softly, "It was never supposed to reach the field." A hush followed. No accusation, just clarity. Now they knew. She hadn't just trained for this, she was built into it. And suddenly, her silence made sense. She wasn't lost in this landscape. She was part of its blueprint. And someone somewhere was watching to see if she still fitted. They saw it just past the next ridge, a faint blinking light. Low, red, artificial. Sergeant Hale exhaled. "That's a beacon. Extraction point." The mood shifted. Backs straightened. Shoulders lifted. Even the wind seemed lighter. For the first time in hours, someone smiled. Captain Hartwell raised his radio, tried again. Static, but weaker now. Emily didn't smile. She crouched low, pressed both palms into the sand. Waited. The hum was still there. But not random. It was layered. Spread wide. Systematic. She opened her eyes. "Don't move toward the light." Hale blinked. "What are you talking about?" "It's right there." Emily stood, her voice sharper than before. "It's bait. They want us to go there. It's laced." She pointed beyond the beacon to a stretch of land where the sand lay oddly undisturbed. The minefield didn't end. We just reached the edge of the net. And suddenly the light didn't feel like rescue. It felt like a trigger. It was just one sound. Small, barely audible beneath the wind. A soft mechanical click, but every body froze. Sergeant Hale stood mid-step, eyes wide breath locked in his throat. His boot rested on something just below the surface. Not sand, not stone. Something metal. Time didn't slow. It stopped. Emily turned slowly. Her gaze met his. No panic, just silence, the kind that came before consequences. She stepped forward carefully, arms out, voice low. "Don't move, Hale. Not even to blink." He was sweating now. Not from heat. From the realization that this wasn't theoretical anymore. This was him. She crouched beside his leg hands hovering near the sand. Then she saw it, the casing half-exposed pressure-based. A newer model. Her voice was calm, but it had a new edge. "This isn't standard military," Hartwell asked. "Then what is it?" Emily didn't answer, because she wasn't sure she wanted to. Emily knelt beside Sergeant Hale, the sand shifting softly beneath her knees. He wasn't breathing. Or maybe he was, but so shallow it barely counted. His eyes were locked on hers. She didn't blink. She'd seen this mechanism before. Not in the field, but in a quiet room years ago, where a man in a suit had asked her, "If pressure activates, can your instincts beat time?" Now she had no timer, no tools, just fingertips memory. And breath. She whispered more to herself than anyone. The earth never lies. It only waits. She pressed her palm gently into the sand beside the trigger, reading the weight, the give. Then, slowly precisely, she shifted the pressure-matching force, redirecting tension. One click. Then another. But no explosion. And just like that, it was done. The desert exhaled. Sergeant Hale dropped to his knees. Then laughed. Then cried. Quietly. Captain Hartwell looked at Emily and said, "You just disarmed a weapon that doesn't exist on any record." Emily stood. Some things don't need records, only memory. They didn't cheer. They didn't speak. When Emily stood, the entire unit just watched her like they were seeing her for the first time. Not as a pretty face, not as a mystery, but as someone who had touched death and told it to wait. Sergeant Hale sat in the sand, hands, trembling eyes fixed on the place where his foot had almost written his name into the earth. Captain Hartwell stepped beside her, voice soft. "You've done this before." Emily didn't answer, not directly. She looked out toward the horizon where the beacon still blinked false and hollow. "That wasn't a test," she said. "Not for me." She looked back at him. It was for them. Whoever's watching. The desert had gone still again, but it wasn't peace. It was that same charged hush before a second wave, and suddenly surviving felt like the beginning. Not the end. They gathered in a half-circle around her. No formation, no rank. Just people, dusty shaken and ready to understand. Emily knelt, pulled something from her pack. Not a weapon, not a tool. A folded map torn at the edges, stained with heat and time. But what it showed was not the map they'd been given. It marked zones, not terrain, not enemy positions, but frequencies. Pulse zones, sensor clusters, behavioral triggers. Hartwell took one look and said, "This is from inside." Emily nodded. This operation wasn't about navigation. It was about response. She looked at each of them, not to ask permission but to share burden. They wanted to know what I'd do when everything failed. When you all looked to me. When instinct met protocol. She paused. They didn't think I'd get you through it. A long beat. They underestimated the ground. And they underestimated you. No one spoke for a long while. They didn't need to. Every man in Bravo 3 knew what had just happened, not just the survival, not just the defusal, but the way the story had bent around someone they never expected to carry it. Emily stood at the edge of the group, arms folded, gaze still distant, like she was listening to something none of them could hear. Captain Hartwell finally broke the silence. "Lieutenant Reese." She turned. "You're not just a survivor. You're the reason any of us still are." Torres nodded slowly. They called her Barbie. Hale let out a breath. "Not anymore." Someone muttered under their breath, almost like a prayer, "Earthwalker," and this time no one scoffed. They'd seen what she could do with no tech, no rank, no praise, just hands in the dirt, and an ancient gift she refused to turn into a weapon. 2 days later, back at the base, the official reports began. There were questions, of course, debriefs, reviews, paperwork, but what couldn't be filed was what had changed. Emily didn't ask for anything. She didn't need to. She simply showed up early, composed, focused, when the next unit began prep for terrain survival training. And when she spoke, they listened. Not because her voice was louder, but because it had weight. The same men who once laughed at her now scribbled notes. The same officer who questioned her presence now sat in the back row, nodding silently. She didn't teach maps. She taught something older. How to read tension in wind. How to hear wrongness beneath stillness. How to trust a truth too quiet for machines. No medals were given that week. But something far rarer was handed to her in every glance: authority. The kind no rank can give, and no one can take. The room had no rank, no orders, just people, boots, dusty hearts, humbled notebooks open. Emily stood at the front, palms open, not holding anything. For once, she wasn't reading the earth. She was reading them. She didn't lecture. She told a story about her grandfather, about canyon winds and still rocks, about walking barefoot across red clay and learning to listen to what didn't make noise. Then she paused, looked them all in the eye. "Everyone teaches you how to speak with confidence," she said. "But no one teaches you how to listen with respect, a beat, not to radios, or orders, or data, to the world, to each other, to yourselves." Silence fell, but not the awkward kind. The kind that follows a truth that just fits. And in that moment, Emily Reese, once dismissed, once doubted, became more than a story. She became a mirror. Some stories end with celebration. This one ends with something quieter. Understanding. Emily never asked to lead, never raised her voice. She simply placed her hand on the ground and waited for it to speak. In a world addicted to noise, it took a woman of silence to guide them through death. She wasn't the strongest. She wasn't the highest ranked. She wasn't, by military standards, the most qualified. But she listened, and when the moment came, they listened to her. Years from now, none of those men will remember every step they took in that minefield, but they will remember who stepped first, and how she did it. Because when the noise fades and the dust settles, the earth doesn't remember the loudest voice in the room. It remembers the one who bent down, opened her hand, and asked nothing but truth in return. And that is why she walked first.